Okay. Well, 100% of the visible universe is such, strictly and wholly and only due to magnetism. That which gives air, if you will, to the balloon from the microscopic and the atomic to the macroscopic is solely and proprietarily and only due to magnetism. So then becomes the conundrum of humanity, being physical beings, dealing with physical things, eating physical food, and dealing with our physical cars and our physical jobs, and grasping out with things with our physical hands and other physical objects. We are only able to think of things from the premise of physicality. We only have the ability to think in terms of matter, of what can be quantified. And then we're left with the issue that 100% of the universe is fields, and fields are not particles. They cannot be quantified. They have neither quantity nor quality. Now certainly we can give definition or qualification to a field only with a time variable. Maxwellian field equations or expressions of field interactions and quantifications only over a given period of time. But what are we talking about a field in principle? Now, long before I ever discovered the invention of the ferrocell by my buddy Tim, I discovered an equation, and I knew that Mother Nature worked off the premise that Mother Nature is not insane, for lack of a better term. Mother Nature is not a cross-eyed hooker on crack, nor does she have a calculator. She only understands one thing and one thing only: a binary principle of force and motion and inertia and acceleration. Force and motion, we have volume. Okay? This is exactly what you'll see underneath the ferrocell. Okay? You'll actually see this spirograph-like toroidal bloom. Okay? Obviously so. Now we understand magnetism. Well, no, we don't. We know that magnetism is a torus at the atomic scale, and we can also see it underneath the ferrocell. We can even see it to a certain degree so far as the delineation between the North Pole and the South Pole of this magnet. Now, a magnet doesn't have polarity. Well, that's kind of hard to explain, isn't it? Here you can see the dividing line of any and every magnet right there in the middle. That white little line. Here we have the North Pole, here we have the South Pole, here we have the plane of inertia, the plane of rest. Okay? Now, it's always hard to give definition to what is meta-Euclidean or meta-phenomenal. And then we're talking about a principle that even the Greeks understood, and even Euclid pointed out the geometry that existed before geometry. So what are we referring to? Not really a great book. Nobody understands counter space. Nobody understands inertia. Projective geometry, same thing. Huge book. So what are we talking about? Before any geometric could be made, we first have to start with a point. But a point is a human abstraction. So, well, that's a point. No, there's no such thing as a point. When we're talking about field geometry, and we're talking about loss of inertia, there is only a point line. There's no such thing as a line or a point. It takes a line to make a point, and it takes a point to make a line. We're speaking about Cartesian coordinates, two-dimensionally or three-dimensionally. There's no such thing from the premise of field theory as a point or a line. There's only a point line. And we have to get into the definition of what defines polarity. What do we mean by a pole? Well, a magnet has a North Pole and a South Pole. Well, no, it doesn't. Well, what do you mean? Now, of course we know a magnet has a North Pole and a South Pole. Now we have to dig a little bit deeper intellectually. What we're looking at is something just like this. Okay? Now, an hourglass is a really neat little analogy and a visual model, since human beings only understand things if you give them conceptual, structural models to base their comprehension around, and then they're able to work their way back and deduce or abduce the nature of what something is. Just as an hourglass, we only have time in either bulb. Right here in the center, we have no time, we have no force, no motion. If we were to think of this as an infinitely small point of inertia, point, once again, being a human abstraction, it means nothing. We have the exact same thing here. Now we're going to have to define space and counter space. No field is ever terminated in space. Space is nothing. Space is the absence of inertia. You cannot give reification to something that doesn't exist. The ancient Indians and Greeks understood this perfectly. At least the philosophers did. The Indians would love to talk about the rope snake analogy. Back then, if you got bit by a snake, you got no cure. You're going to die. You're going to suffer, and then you're going to die. And so everybody was scared to death when they went out to the bushes to take a dump or a piss that they were going to get bit by a snake because you're going to die. And then they would talk about someone seeing a piece of rope in the dark or the dusk, mistaking that for a snake, and an old man having a heart attack or being scared to death. Being scared to death or even dying. Well, why did the person die? Well, he saw a rope snake. The rope snake analogy is really famous in Indian philosophical contexts for talking about that which does not exist affecting something else. But what we're talking about is a privation. Okay? Space is nothing. It is literally the absence of inertia. Like saying someone that's naked, cold, and wet is in a shadow, they're going to freeze to death because they were in the shadow. It's like, well, what killed them? Well, the shadow killed them. They were naked, cold, and wet. Well, shadow is not anything. We cannot reify absence. Okay? Nobody can logically, intelligently, philosophically, and in a formal debate reify absence. Okay? It's not possible. We can't say that something that didn't exist killed somebody. It's like saying that unicorns or pixie dust, cause someone to vanish or, fall off a cliff. I mean, it's equally absurd. So we can't speak about space as properties. And Tesla said this as well. He called Einstein's notion that space as having properties that does something or act on anything is ludicrous. And of course Tesla was right. Here we have the shape that's exactly like this. It's the hyperboloid. You're going to have to understand what projective geometry is, and this is really, really difficult for human beings. We have the hyperboloid. Over here we have space, time, force, and motion, and right here in the center we've got nothing. We've got the null point of inertia. Now, so what defines magnetism or a magnet? There's the plane of inertia, right along the middle right there. Where there's zero magnetism. It's like if you were able to go into a bubble in the very center of the earth. Okay? Imagine that were possible. At the very center of the heart of gravity, there is no gravity. Of course, gravity doesn't exist. That which we call magnetic attraction is nothing other than dielectric acceleration. So gravity, of course, exists in the contemporaneous sense that we understand that something falls, or you're going to fall and die, or an apple falls, stuff falls to earth. But gravity as an autonomous force or field does not exist. It is nothing other than dielectric acceleration, that which we call magnetic attraction. So now we have to give denotation, definition, and not mere definition, but true definition, because descriptions are what I can get from children. Well, you put two magnets together, they attract or they repel, depending on how you put the poles. Well, let's define attraction, repulsion, and polarity. Human beings, there's not a single... I've got every book on magnetism that exists. Human beings have never defined polarity. What is a pole? Well, it has two poles. Well, that's a description again. You're working in circularity here. Well, it's got two poles. That's what a magnet means. That's what polarity means. A magnet's got north poles. No, it doesn't. Well, what does it mean then? Wise ass, you tattooed freak. What does it mean? It means that Mother Nature doesn't draw a line like this, or like this, or like this. Mother Nature only knows how to draw a line like this, or this, or this. You get the point? And what does that mean? You have to understand and study the Poincaré disk model of projective geometry. The loss of inertia necessitates, as the Greeks have a famous term for necessity, but it doesn't really mean necessity. It means something far, far deeper. The ancient Greek is called ananke. Necessitates polarity. The loss of inertia, the single rest point. Here you can see the rest point. It's right in the middle. Right here in the center. Right there. But it's not located there because I've already cut this magnet a million billion times. Each little slice will have a north pole and a south pole. It is concentrated there, just like pressure. No difference than saying water flows downhill. So there is not an inertial plane here. It is forced, located there. Why is it forced and located there? Because it is inverse to space, inverse to force and motion. The inverse to force and motion is inertia and acceleration. Mother Nature is not a cross-eyed crack whore, nor does she have a calculator. Okay? So when I speak about what defines the magnet as being a reciprocating, precessional hyperboloid. What the hell does that mean? That sounds so complicated. People say, oh, you use these big-ass words and you don't define them. Well, maybe it's the words aren't that big that I'm using. Maybe it's your vocabulary is a little too small. Centrifugal divergence, centripetal convergence. Okay? It's no different than saying turning on the shower and pulling the drain plug. Centrifugal divergence, centripetal convergence. So let's take a look at what this magnet looks like. Now there's two types of geometry in the universe, and only two. Field geometry and physical geometry. Okay? Only those two. One defines the other, and the other defines the other. Sound kind of convoluted? Not really. Once again, let's define the torus and the hyperbola. You see that spirograph pattern? It's the same thing you'll see underneath the ferrule cell when you put a magnet underneath it. So, what's the inverse of this torus, this donut shape? Okay? It's the hyperboloid, just like this hourglass shape. Okay? So, let's insert the hyperboloid, the negative image, which is not so easy to do. Not while I'm messing with the camera anyway. Ta-da, there we go. The inverse image of force and motion, inertia and acceleration. Now, to see this really, we'd actually have to have multiple layers of these, of the same thing, force and motion, and multiple layers of inertia and acceleration, but ultimately irreducible to this one thing only. You see this? Hyperboloid, force and motion, inertia and acceleration. You can think of this bubble as the shower spout, the shower head, and these two as the drain. Okay, this is the only way Mother Nature knows how to work. She only works off two principles, force and motion, inertia and acceleration. They're both one and the same thing, which is inertia and the loss of that inertia. And the loss of that inertia was a discovery I made that the ancient Pythagoreans discovered long, long ago, and it's tattooed right there on my wrist. 1/5 to the power of -3. Discussing that, however, would take a really, really long time to do. A long time. Okay? You see this? Sunflower pattern? It's the same thing you'll see underneath the ferrule cell. If you look closely here, you'll see a golden ratio pattern that follows 85 degrees and 137.5 degrees. That's the golden angle, and 137.5 degrees, which, by the way, is a discovery I made. I always wondered why a sand dollar was shaped that way, and you will notice that it follows 85 degrees and 137.5 degrees, the golden ratio, the golden angle, as extrapolated out in an angle. Let's take a look at something else. That which we call magnetic acceleration and magnetic repulsion do not exist. It is dielectric voidance and countervoidance. What you will see underneath the ferrule cell is this. Which one do you think, we're looking at this versus this, okay? Which one of these do you think is dielectric voidance or magnetic attraction? This set or this set? The set below is how a magnet normally looks, and this is also what you'll see as two magnets are undergoing dielectric voidance, or what you conventionally, irrationally, and incorrectly call magnetic attraction or acceleration. These are two magnets coming together. You'll see the hypertrochoid pattern forming, and there we go. Up here you'll see increasing force and motion. As two magnets with like polarity come together, that which you call magnetic repulsion is dielectric counteravoidance. Force and motion, increasing force and motion. And amazingly, once you're able to press them together, which unless they're weak magnets is really, really hard to do, the pattern that forms, and you actually can see this underneath the ferrule cell, and it's exactly what I predicted in my equation, because Mother Nature is a really simple broad. It's just that human beings are really, 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 really dumb. Is you will see the exact same hyperboloid, see this? Hyperboloid and torus that makes up, this is amazing. This is exactly like fractal field pressure geometry. Okay? Exactly like it. Exactly like it. This is also, by the way, if you put a line here and a line here, and these are AC currents running down your street, you know, carrying a bunch of voltage, AC current lines. If you put a line here running down through the paper and a line here, this is the exact same thing you'll see on an AC current running down your street. That's why when the power goes out, the lines kind of sag back together, and when the current comes back on again, like after a power outage or during a storm, they'll push apart slightly. Okay, these are magnetic flux divergences, and here is the dielectric acceleration here in the center. See, this is the cross-section side view of this, which is also what you'll see on the side view of any and every magnet. Okay. What you actually can't see without using this, you have to use a ferrocell, is to see this, the hyperboloid and the torus. The torus is definitionally and denotatively magnetism. The hyperboloid is definitionally and denotatively inertia and acceleration. Increasing inertia and acceleration. With the null point right here being the total absence. Time has no meaning. Time is a human contrivance. Time is only a measure of magnitudes. There are two things that are absolutely nothing. Now, they're absolutely something in a conventional sense to us physical, pathetic human beings that were trapped within the bubble of time. Us little human beings live out here. We don't live here, okay? Now, ancient metaphysics would call this the spirit world, and this crap here, the balloon, the material world. The same is true in field mechanics. See those ancient people that we all thought were stupid? They really weren't that stupid. They were actually pretty damn smart. They didn't have microwaves and television sets and Apple iPhones and iPads, but they were very wise. Okay? Right here. Here. Do you get it? Okay, I'm going to turn the hourglass upside down. Okay, I can measure time as it passes from here to here. This is where electromagnetic retardation and phase shift comes from. That's a specific electromagnetic field of study. It's called EM retardation. Okay, here we have time and space and motion. Here we have none of that. None of it. Here, time is meaningless. Here, space is meaningless. Space has no meaning or existence here. Time has no meaning or existence here. Right? You can just block out this hourglass here. You're never going to be able to tell the damn time, are you? Nope. I can't see shit. Nope. Can't tell the time. Nope. I got no way to understand anything. Well, why not? It's all passing right here, right through the point of inertia. Force and motion, inertia and acceleration. Mother Nature is really, really simple. She's been screaming out to you for ages and eons. But human beings, we're not that smart yet. Just not. Actually, it's not smarts or empirical knowledge. It is noesis. It is wisdom. Two totally different things. This is the nature of magnetism. This is how Mother Nature works. It's that damn simple. There's ultimately only one field and 4 field modalities. Okay? Everything is dielectricity. Magnetism is the loss of that inertia. Gravity is no different than dielectric acceleration. Electricity is a hybrid of dielectricity and magnetism. Phi times psi equals Q in Planck of electrification. There's only inertia and the loss of inertia. Everything out here in the bubble of this torus, space, is the absence of inertia. What is space ultimately? It is nothing. It is the absence of inertia. It has no properties. Just as Nikola Tesla said, the guy that gave you 100% of your electrical grid, Einstein didn't give you shit. He didn't invent any of that stuff. Okay? It's powering all these lights. Tesla, Steinmetz, Faraday, Oliver Heaviside. Not Einstein and his bullshit theories. And they're still theories, by the way. Not only are they still theories, those theories are far less supported today than they were a mere 10 or 20 years ago. But that's not the point of this video. You need to understand what a hyperboloid is. What does it make up as far as the model of magnetism? Force and motion, inertia and acceleration. Very simple. Look up Poincaré disk model of projective geometry. Okay? Mother Nature is really, really simple. Everything is field pressure mediation. which is no different than saying you pull the plug on the drain, the water flows down the drain. You know? Force and motion, inertia and acceleration. Mother Nature is not a complicated broad. But nobody understands what the hell she's saying. They just don't. Lux e veritas. Praise wisdom above all else. Thank you and goodbye.